The Hale Industries annual gala transformed the Metropolitan Ballroom into a constellation of wealth and power. Crystal chandeliers cast diamond patterns across marble floors, where champagne flutes clinked like delicate bells. Victoria Hale stood at the center of it all, a force of nature wrapped in midnight silk, her presence commanding the room without effort. At 42, she had built an empire from inherited fragments. The press called her the Iron Lady of Wall Street. Tonight, she wore that title like armor, her sharp jawline set as she discussed quarterly projections with board members who hung on her every calculated word. Evan Miller moved through the crowd like a ghost, pushing his service cart with quiet efficiency. At 38, his body still carried the disciplined posture of his former life, though his calloused hands now gripped mop handles instead of tactical gear. The Navy custodial uniform hung loose on his frame, a stark contrast to the tuxedos surrounding him. He had taken this job 8 months ago, third shift mostly, cleaning after the empire builders went home. It paid enough. It kept food on the table for Lily. It asked nothing of his past. The accident happened in slow motion. A board member gestured expansively, his elbow catching the champagne bottle on Evan's cart. The bottle tipped, arced through the air, and exploded against Victoria's dress in a cascade of golden liquid and shattered crystal. The ballroom fell silent. Victoria's eyes blazed with a fury that made seasoned executives step back. Her $12,000 gown dripped champagne onto Italian leather heels. But worse than the stain was the laughter she imagined behind every frozen face, the whispered judgments about the CEO who couldn't control her own event. "You incompetent fool." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. No excuse would matter. He had learned that much about this world. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll do nothing." Victoria's voice rose, her composure cracking in front of everyone who mattered. "Nothing except leave. You're fired. Get out of my company. Get out of my sight." The security director moved forward, but Evan raised a hand, stopping him. He knelt carefully, beginning to gather the glass shards with steady hands. His movements were practiced, methodical. He had cleaned up worse messes in places where broken glass was the least of anyone's worries. "I said leave it." Victoria snapped. As Evan reached for a larger piece of glass, his sleeve pulled back. The fluorescent lights caught something on his forearm, a tattoo, intricate and unmistakable. A phoenix rising from flames, wrapped around a shield bearing the inscription Deo Presso Liber. The emblem of the Army Special Forces, specifically the Elite Combat Search and Rescue Unit. Victoria's breath caught. Her face, flushed with anger moments before, drained of color. She knew that symbol. She had seen it once before, on a blood-soaked uniform in a place she had spent 7 years trying to forget. But Evan was already standing, gathering his cart. He met her eyes for one brief moment, not with anger, not with plea, just a quiet acceptance that made something twist in her chest. "My apologies, ma'am," he said simply, and walked toward the service exit. The crowd began to murmur. Someone touched Victoria's arm, offering a napkin. She took it mechanically, her mind reeling, unable to shake the image of that tattoo burning behind her eyes. The valet area behind the Metropolitan was a different world from the glittering ballroom. Harsh fluorescent lights replaced chandeliers. The November wind bit through Evan's thin jacket as he emerged into the parking lot, carrying a small box containing his locker contents. A photo of Lily, an extra shirt, a paperback novel with a worn spine. Inside, he could hear the muffled return of conversation, the crisis already becoming an anecdote. He felt nothing. He had been fired from better jobs by better people. His pickup truck sat in the far corner, a 2003 Ford with rust eating through the wheel wells. But sitting on the tailgate, bundled in her purple winter coat, was the only thing that mattered. "Daddy." Lily jumped down, her 7-year-old face splitting into a gap-toothed grin. "You're early." "Did the party finish?" Evan's expression transformed. The stone-faced custodian disappeared, replaced by a father whose entire world lived in that smile. He scooped her up, spinning her once before setting her down. Something like that, Peanut. How was Mrs. Chen? She taught me origami. Look. Lily thrust a paper crane toward him, slightly crumpled but recognizable. She said, if you fold 1,000, you get a wish. Then we better get folding, Evan said, unlocking the truck. He strapped her into the booster seat, tucking her coat around her legs. The heater in the truck barely worked. As he drove through the city streets toward their apartment in the Riverside district, Lily chattered about her day, about the math test she aced, about the field trip permission slip he needed to sign. Evan listened to every word, responding with the kind of attention most fathers saved for board meetings. He did not tell her he had lost his job. He would not let that shadow touch her tonight. Their apartment building was a far cry from the towers of downtown. 6 stories of brown brick, laundry hanging from fire escapes, the smell of a dozen different dinners mixing in the stairwell. Home. Inside their 2-bedroom unit, Lily's artwork covered every available surface. Evan had framed each piece carefully, creating a gallery of rainbow houses and stick-figure families. The furniture was second-hand but clean. The kitchen cramped but organized. While Lily practiced her spelling words at the table, Evan opened his laptop, already searching job listings, warehouse work, overnight security, anything that paid enough and asked few questions. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, his former team medic, who now drove trucks cross-country. Heard you got canned. You need anything? Evan typed back. We're good. Thanks, brother. He had been fired from worse places. He had survived worse nights. This was just another firefight. And the only thing that mattered was making sure Lily never knew they were at war. Bath time was Lily's favorite ritual, though Evan suspected it had more to do with the rubber ducks than actual cleanliness. He sat on the closed toilet lid while she conducted elaborate naval battles in the tub, narrating with the seriousness of a military historian. Admiral Quackers is surrounded, but Captain Splash won't leave anyone behind, she announced, crashing 2 ducks together with sound effects. Evan smiled, but his mind drifted. He rolled up his sleeves to help rinse her hair, and caught his reflection in the mirror specifically. The tattoo that had caused Victoria Hale to freeze like she'd seen a ghost. Because she had, in a way, the phoenix and shield had been inked in a makeshift parlor in Kandahar 7 years ago. Every man in his unit had gotten one after their first successful rescue mission. We pull people from hell, his commanding officer had said. Might as well own it. Evan had pulled 37 people from hell before his career ended. 37 lives snatched from bombs, fires, collapsed buildings, and enemy fire. He remembered most of their faces. Some he dreamed about, but one he had tried hardest to forget. The memory came unbidden, as it always did when he saw that tattoo. The Al Rahman District, September 2018. An aid convoy ambushed. Buildings burning, the acrid taste of smoke mixing with gunpowder and fear. His team had extracted most of the workers, but the intelligence said 3 remained trapped in a basement clinic. Evan had gone back in alone, foolish, heroic. The line between them always paper thin. He found 2 doctors and a young woman, maybe 25, pinned under a collapsed concrete beam. Her leg was crushed, her face gray with shock and blood loss. She wore a volunteer's vest, some American nonprofit teaching business skills to local women. I can't feel my leg, she had whispered. I can't. Please don't let me die here. Not today, Evan had told her. The same words he told everyone. Not on my watch. The building had been collapsing in real time. He made a choice, a terrible, necessary choice. He lifted the beam enough for the doctors to pull her free, then hauled her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, while the ceiling came down behind them. He remembered her weight, lighter than it should have been. He remembered her breathing against his neck as he ran through smoke and gunfire. He remembered laying her in the medical helicopter, her hand gripping his sleeve, her eyes trying to focus on his face. Who are you? She had asked. Nobody, he had answered. Just stay alive. He never learned her name. 6 hours later, his own mission went sideways, the one that ended with a dishonorable discharge to cover up a general's mistake, his unit scattered, his future erased. "Daddy? You're crying." Evan blinked, finding Lily watching him with worried eyes. He reached up, surprised to find his cheeks wet. "Just got soap in my eyes, peanut." He lied, forcing a smile. "Come on, let's get you dried off before you turn into a prune." As he wrapped her in a towel, he glanced again at the mirror, at the tattoo that marked him as a guardian, a rescuer. A man who pulled people from flames. Victoria Hale had seen that mark tonight. And if she was the woman from Al Rahman, if she remembered, everything was about to get complicated. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, he had a daughter to tuck in and a bedtime story to read. Victoria Hale did not sleep. She stood in her penthouse office at 3 in the morning, staring at the city lights below. A glass of scotch, untouched, in her hand. The champagne-stained dress had been replaced by a silk blouse and tailored pants, but she still felt the ghost of that cold liquid seeping through fabric, still heard the silence of the ballroom after her outburst. She had built this empire through control, through calculation, through never showing weakness. Tonight, she had shown both weakness and cruelty. And the board would smell blood. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Texts from her publicist, her chief of staff, her mother. She ignored them all. Instead, she pulled up a photograph on her computer, one she kept in an encrypted folder, one she had not looked at in 5 years. The image was grainy, taken by a relief worker in Afghanistan. It showed her on a stretcher, bandaged and broken, being loaded onto a helicopter, and in the corner, barely visible, a figure in tactical gear walking away. The photograph was too blurry to make out features, but she could see the emblem on his shoulder, the same emblem she had glimpsed tonight on Evan Miller's arm. She had spent 2 years recovering from that day, 3 surgeries to save her leg. Another year of physical therapy before she could walk without a cane. The doctors had called it miraculous. Her father, dying of cancer at the time, had called it a waste. "You should have been focusing on the business, not playing humanitarian in a war zone." She had tried to find the soldier who carried her out. The military had been useless, citing operational security. The man had disappeared into classified shadows, one more unnamed hero in an unnamed war. Until tonight. The morning sun found Victoria in the same position, except now her office was filling with executives. Jonathan Price, her chief operating officer, set a tablet in front of her without preamble. "It's already on 3 gossip sites." Ice Queen melts down at charity gala. They have video. Victoria watched herself on the screen, watched the transformation from composed CEO to furious tyrant, watched Evan Miller kneel in the broken glass with the dignity of a man who had nothing left to lose. "We need to control this narrative," Jonathan continued. "A statement about—" "Find him," Victoria interrupted. "I'm sorry?" "Evan Miller. The custodian. Find him. Get me his file." Everything. Her assistant, Patricia, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, you fired him." "Har already processed. I don't care what HR processed. I want his employment record, his address, his background check, everything." By noon, the room fell silent. Margaret Chen, the only board member older than Victoria, spoke carefully. "Victoria, whatever you're planning, consider the optics. Firing a man publicly and then investigating him looks vindictive." Or, Victoria met her gaze. "It looks like due diligence I should have done before hiring him. Maybe he's a security risk. Maybe there's something in his background we missed." But Margaret was not fooled. She had known Victoria since childhood. "Don't lose your humanity chasing your pride, dear. You've already taken his job. Don't take what's left of his dignity, too." Victoria turned back to the window, dismissing them all with silence. She was not chasing pride. She was chasing a ghost from a burning building. A voice that had promised she would not die that day. She was chasing the truth about the man whose career she might have just destroyed with her temper. And if he was who she thought he was, she owed him far more than an apology. The Riverside Community Center was not the kind of place Victoria Hale usually visited. The building was weathered brick, wedged between a laundromat and a check-cashing store, its paint peeling in the November wind. But according to Patricia's research, this was where Evan Miller volunteered every Saturday morning, teaching a self-defense class for at-risk youth. Victoria had disguised her visit as a site inspection for Hale Industries' community outreach program, a program that, until this morning, had existed only in her fabricated explanation to her driver. She wore jeans for the first time in a decade, a simple sweater, minimal makeup. She wanted to observe without being observed. Inside, the center smelled of old wood and fresh coffee. A bulletin board displayed flyers for GED classes, food banks, job training. The gym at the back echoed with young voices. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching. Evan moved through a circle of teenagers with patient efficiency, adjusting stances, correcting grips. He was not teaching them to fight, she realized. He was teaching them to escape, to defend, to survive. Each move he demonstrated was practical, designed for someone smaller or weaker to overcome a larger threat. The goal is never to win a fight, he was saying. The goal is to get home safe, always. A girl, maybe 16, raised her hand. What if you freeze? What if you're too scared to do anything? Evan's expression softened. Fear is normal. Fear is your body trying to protect you. The trick is learning to move with it, not against it. We practice until it becomes muscle memory, until your body knows what to do, even when your brain is screaming. He demonstrated a simple wrist release, walking each student through it individually, with the kind of attention that made them stand taller. Victoria recognized that teaching style: patient, thorough, ego-free, military. The class ended with water breaks and fist bumps. As the teenagers filed out, chattering about their weekend plans, a small figure burst through the door. "Daddy!" Lily Miller was a blur of motion, her backpack nearly as big as she was. Her hair in pigtails that had clearly been styled by someone who tried their best. She launched herself at Evan, who caught her with practiced ease. "How was art class, Peanut?" "I made a painting of us, and Miss Rodriguez said it was good enough for the showcase." She noticed Victoria standing awkwardly by the door. "Oh. Hello." The greeting was so open, so unsuspicious, that Victoria felt something crack in her chest. "Hello," she managed. Evan turned, and their eyes met. Victoria watched the recognition hit him, watched his posture shift subtly. Not aggressive, but alert. Protecting. "Lily, go grab your stuff from Miss Rodriguez's room," he said quietly. "I'll be right there." "Okay." The girl bounced away, already chattering to herself about her painting. The silence between them stretched. Finally, Evan spoke. "Miss Hale, I didn't expect to see you here." "I was." Victoria faltered, her carefully prepared speech evaporating. "I wanted to apologize. For last night. It was uncalled for. It was an accident. The champagne, I mean." His voice was neutral, professional. "You had every right to be angry. Not to humiliate you, not to fire you without cause." Evan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Is that why you're here? To offer my job back? Would you take it?" He looked at her for a long moment. And Victoria had the uncomfortable feeling of being assessed by someone who had evaluated life or death situations for a living. "No," he said simply. "But I appreciate the gesture. If you'll excuse me, my daughter's waiting." He moved past her toward the hallway. Victoria called after him. "You saved my life." Evan stopped, but did not turn around. "In Al Rahman, September 2018, you carried me out of that building." The silence was deafening. "You have me confused with someone else," he said, his voice carefully flat. Then he walked away, leaving Victoria alone with her certainty and his denial. Victoria Hale had built an empire on information. She knew how to extract secrets from balance sheets, hidden agendas from board votes, competitive advantages from market research. But the military, she discovered, guarded its secrets better than any corporation. It took 3 days and 4 favors called in from Pentagon contacts before she found someone willing to talk. Colonel James Harrison, retired, agreed to meet her at a quiet steakhouse in Georgetown. He was 65, weathered by deployments she could not imagine, carrying the kind of authority that never fully left military men. "I can give you 30 minutes, he said as they Saturday, "and nothing I say goes on record." Agreed. Harrison studied her over his whiskey. "You were in Al-Rahman, the aid worker convoy. You know about that? I commanded the rescue operation. I know every person we pulled out that day, including you, Miss Hale. You were 26, crushed femur, internal bleeding, about 30 minutes from bleeding out when my team reached you." Victoria's hand trembled slightly around her water glass. "The soldier who carried me out, his name was Evan Miller." Harrison's expression hardened. "I can neither confirm nor deny." "Please." The word came out more desperate than she intended. "I'm not trying to expose anything. I just need to know if the man I destroyed last week is the same man who saved my life 7 years ago." The colonel was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, the sound of a man carrying too many secrets for too long. "Staff Sergeant Evan Miller. Combat Search and Rescue, Special Forces. 3 tours, 37 confirmed rescues, 12 commendations for valor." Harrison paused. "And 1 dishonorable discharge." Victoria's stomach dropped. "What? 6 hours after we extracted you, Miller's unit was deployed to a village near the Pakistani border. Intelligence said there was a high-value target. Intel was wrong. It was a wedding. Civilians, children, oh God." Miller's commanding officer gave the order to engage anyway. Said they'd already committed, couldn't abort without compromising the mission. Miller refused, actually stood between his unit and those civilians. Harrison's eyes were distant, seeing something Victoria could only imagine. His captain reported him for insubordination. Miller took the fall to protect his team. Dishonorable discharge, all benefits stripped. His record sealed and buried. That's not justice. That's politics. Harrison drained his whiskey. The brass needed a scapegoat for a bad op. Miller volunteered, rather than let his whole unit burn. That's the kind of man he is. Is, Victoria said firmly. He still is. He's teaching kids self-defense in a community center. He's raising a daughter alone. He's trying to disappear, Harrison interrupted. And you need to let him. Men like Miller, when they get spit out by the system, they don't want to be found. They certainly don't want rich civilians playing hero on their behalf. But Victoria was already standing, her mind racing through possibilities. What would it take to appeal the discharge? You can't. I have lawyers. I have connections. What would it take? Harrison looked at her with something between pity and respect. Even if you could, and that's a big if, you'd need Miller's cooperation. You'd need him to relive the worst day of his life in front of a military tribunal. You'd need him to fight a system that already broke him once. He stood, dropping cash on the table. Ask yourself if you're doing this for him. Or for yourself. Miss Hale, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're trying to ease your guilt by fixing a man who doesn't want to be fixed. The envelope arrived at Evan's apartment on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who waited for a signature like he was handling classified documents. Inside was a check for $50,000, a letter on Hale Industries letterhead, and a contract offering him a position as Director of Safety and Emergency Protocols. Evan read the letter twice, then set it aside and made Lily's breakfast. The second package arrived 3 days later, a trust fund for Lily's education, already funded with $250,000, no strings attached, according to the accompanying documentation. Evan returned it unopened. The third attempt was a phone call from Patricia. Victoria's assistant, explaining that Miss Hale simply wanted to talk, to apologize properly, to perhaps find some way to make amends. "Tell Miss Hale I appreciate her concern," Evan said carefully, "but I don't need her charity. I need her to leave my family alone." That evening, Victoria appeared at the community center herself, waiting until the self-defense class ended and the teenagers had dispersed. Lily was at a friend's house for a play date, which Evan suspected was not coincidental. "You had my schedule investigated," he said flatly. "That's either dedicated or creepy." "Dedicated," Victoria said. She wore her CEO uniform tonight, power suit, heels, armor. But her hands were shaking slightly. "I need to talk to you. Not as your former employer, as the woman whose life you saved. I told you, you have me confused." Al Rahman District. The 16th of September 2018. "You carried me out of a collapsing building while the ceiling came down behind us." Her voice cracked. "You told me, 'Not today, not on my watch.' I spent 2 years looking for you, and then I spent 5 years trying to forget because I couldn't find you, and it was driving me insane." Evan's careful composure finally cracked. "So you found me. Congratulations. What do you want? A medal? I want to help you. You want to help yourself." The words came out harder than he intended. "You want to write a check and feel better about humiliating me in front of 100 people. You want to play savior because someone once saved you. But that's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works." Victoria's voice rose. "Tell me what I can do, because I can't sleep knowing I destroyed the career of a man who gave me my life back." "You didn't destroy my career," Evan said quietly. "The army did that. You just fired me from a job I was barely qualified for, and definitely overqualified to care about. Trust me, Miss Hale, you're not that important to my story." The words hit like physical blows. Victoria recoiled, her composure finally shattering. "I found out what happened," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "After you saved me. About the village. About how you took the fall for your commanding officer." Evan went very still. "You had no right. I want to fight it. Appeal the discharge. Get your record corrected. You were a hero. And you got punished for doing the right thing. And that's not—" "Stop." Evan's voice was low, controlled, dangerous. "You don't get to rewrite my past because it makes you uncomfortable. That discharge bought my team their futures. It was worth it. And I don't need you digging up buried bones so you can feel like you paid off some imaginary debt." He grabbed his jacket, moving toward the door. "I don't need rescuing, Miss Hale. I've built a good life. I have a daughter who's happy and healthy. I don't need your money or your guilt or your crusade. I just need you to let me go." Victoria watched him leave, her carefully constructed plans crumbling around her. The call came at 2 in the morning, 3 weeks after their last conversation. Evan was awake anyway. Insomnia was an old companion when his phone lit up with Marcus's number. "Turn on the news," his old team medic said without preamble. Channel 7. The television showed Hale Tower engulfed in flames. The 50-story building was a torch against the night sky, flames pouring from the 23rd floor. The news anchor was saying something about an electrical fire, about evacuation procedures, about the unprecedented response time of the fire department. But Evan was already moving, pulling on jeans, grabbing his keys. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked, still on the line. "There are people in there." "Evan, you're not. You can't. Can you get here in 15 minutes? A pause. Then, 12. Evan shook Mrs. Chen, awake the elderly neighbor, who had become Lily's unofficial grandmother. "I need you to stay with Lily. Emergency. I'll be back before morning." Mrs. Chen, who had survived the fall of Saigon, asked no questions. "Go. We'll be fine." The drive downtown took 8 minutes of aggressive traffic violations. Evan parked 3 blocks away, as close as the police barriers allowed, and approached on foot. His mind was already cataloging the scene: wind direction, fire behavior, structural integrity, evacuation routes. The fire department had established a perimeter. Evan found the incident commander, a woman in her 50s with ash on her face and exhaustion in her eyes. "I need to know who's still inside," he said. "Sir, you need to step back." Staff Sergeant Evan Miller, Army Special Forces Combat Search and Rescue. "I know that building. I used to work there." "Who's unaccounted for?" The commander hesitated, then made a decision. "Third floor, East Wing. A security guard and a cleaning crew." And she consulted her tablet. Victoria Hale, the CEO. She apparently returned to her office to retrieve some documents. Now she's trapped with about 15 employees who couldn't evacuate in time. Evan's blood went cold. "Which floor?" 50. "The fire's on 23 and climbing. They have maybe 30 minutes before the heat makes the upper floors untenable. The emergency stairs? Compromised. The main elevators are down. We're bringing in a helicopter." But the smoke, Evan was already moving, Marcus appearing at his shoulder with a duffel bag full of gear they'd both sworn they'd never need again. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said, but he was already pulling out respirators, gloves, tactical flashlights. "Yeah," Evan said, "strapping on equipment." "I do." They went in through a service entrance Evan remembered from his custodial days, a route that bypassed the main fire. The stairwell was dark, filled with smoke that made their flashlights into narrow beams cutting through fog. 23 floors up, they could hear the fire roaring like a living thing. The heat was oppressive even through their gear. Evan's training kicked in assess, adapt, advance. Marcus covered their 6, moving in perfect synchronization born from 100 missions. At floor 50, they found chaos. Employees huddled in the break room, farthest from the windows, using wet towels to block smoke from under the door. And in the center, coordinating everything with the calm of someone used to managing crises, was Victoria Hale. She looked up as the door opened, her eyes widening as she recognized Evan through the smoke. "You came," she whispered. "Yeah, well," Evan said, already assessing the group for injuries. "Saving people is kind of my thing." Victoria had always prided herself on control. But watching Evan Miller move through her employees with professional efficiency, she understood the difference between management and leadership. He was not asking permission or giving speeches. He was triaging, evaluating, organizing 15 terrified people into a unit that could move. "Anyone injured?" he called out. "Smoke inhalation? Mobility issues?" 2 people raised their hands, an older accountant with asthma and a paralegal who had twisted her ankle during the evacuation attempt. "They go first," Evan said to Marcus, who was already breaking chemical light sticks and handing them out. "Everyone else, I need you to follow instructions exactly. No heroics, no stopping, no looking back. Understand?" Victoria watched her vice president of operations, a man who had never taken orders from anyone below board level, nod meekly and accept a respirator. "The stairs are partially blocked on 43, Marcus reported. "We'll need to go through the maintenance shaft. Can you manage that?" Evan asked the group. "It's going to be tight and dark." "We'll manage," Victoria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What do you need from us? Just trust me." Evan met her eyes. "And when I say move, you move." They began the descent. Evan led with the injured employees. Marcus brought up the rear, and Victoria found herself in the middle, watching Evan navigate obstacles with a grace that made her realize how little she had understood about him. At floor 43, the stairwell opened onto a nightmare. Flames had breached the wall, turning the corridor into an oven. The group hesitated. "We can't go through that," someone whispered. "We don't have to," Evan said. He pried open a maintenance panel, revealing a crawl space that ran parallel to the stairs. "Single file. Stay low. Don't touch the walls, they're hot." It was claustrophobic, terrifying, and brutally effective. They emerged 3 floors down, bypassing the worst of the fire. But at floor 32, the building shuddered. A structural groan echoed through the stairwell. And suddenly the stairs above them began to collapse. "Run!" Evan shouted. Now, Victoria felt his hand on her back, propelling her forward as concrete and steel rained down behind them. They burst through a door into a hallway, and Evan immediately began counting heads. 14, we're missing someone. Patricia. Her assistant. The woman who had been at her side for 12 years. She was right behind me, Victoria gasped. Evan was already moving back toward the collapsed stairwell. Marcus grabbed his arm. That section's gone, brother. If she's alive. Evan shrugged off the grip. I heard her. 50 seconds. That's all I need. He disappeared into the smoke before Victoria could process what was happening. Time became elastic, stretching impossibly as she counted each second, imagining the building coming down, imagining having to tell Patricia's family. And then Evan emerged, Patricia over his shoulder, coughing but conscious. He set her down gently, checked her vitals with practiced hands, then nodded to Marcus. Now we run. The final descent was a blur. Fire crews met them at floor 10, taking over the evacuation. Paramedics swarmed immediately. Victoria found herself wrapped in a thermal blanket, breathing oxygen from a mask, watching as Evan systematically checked on every person he had pulled from that building. He reached her last. You okay? Victoria pulled off the oxygen mask. You saved my life. Again, technically, Marcus helped. But there was the ghost of a smile in his eyes. You're welcome. Then he turned to leave, and Victoria realized he was just going to walk away, disappear back into whatever quiet life he'd built. Wait, she called. Please, just wait. The sunrise found them in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, surrounded by exhausted firefighters and Victoria's shell-shocked employees. Evan sat at the counter, drinking coffee that tasted like regret, while Marcus made calls to check on their insurance. Victoria slid onto the stool beside him. She had ditched the power suit somewhere around floor 38, and now wore a paramedic's spare shirt and jeans that were 3 sizes too big. She looked more human than Evan had ever seen her. I owe you an apology, she said. You already apologized. Not for firing you. For trying to fix you. She wrapped her hands around her own coffee mug. Colonel Harrison was right. I was trying to ease my guilt by rewriting your past. I never asked what you wanted. I never asked if you were happy. Evan was quiet for a long moment. I'm not unhappy, he said finally. I have Lily. I have purpose. I don't need the life I used to have, but you deserve recognition for. I deserve to live in peace. He turned to face her. The military took my career, but I gave them that choice. No one forced me. And yeah, it sucked, but it also freed me. I'm not Staff Sergeant Miller anymore. I'm just a dad who teaches kids self-defense and tries to be a good man. Victoria nodded slowly. I can respect that. Can you? She met his eyes. I can try. The sun was fully up now, casting golden light through the diner windows. Patricia appeared, her arm bandaged, but her spirit intact, to inform Victoria that the media was clamoring for a statement. Tell them. Victoria paused. Tell them that Hale Industries was saved tonight by a civilian volunteer with military training, and that we're grateful beyond measure. Should I include his name? Patricia asked carefully. No, Evan said quickly. Victoria looked at him, then back at Patricia. No names. Just gratitude. 2 weeks later, Victoria appeared at the community center again. This time, she carried a proposal instead of a check. Hale Industries wants to fund a scholarship program, she explained, standing in the gym after Evan's class. For the children of first responders and veterans. Full ride, any school, no strings. I'd like you to help me design it. Not as an employee, as a consultant. You'd have complete control over the selection criteria. Evan crossed his arms. Why? Because you understand what these families need better than I ever could. And because, she hesitated, because I'm trying to do better. Not to fix you. To fix myself. Lily appeared in the doorway, her backpack bouncing. Daddy, are we getting pizza? Sure, Peanut. Then to Victoria. Would you like to join us? Fair warning, she'll talk your ear off about marine biology. Victoria blinked, surprised by the invitation. I'd like that. Over terrible pizza, in a restaurant decorated with plastic sea creatures, Victoria learned that Lily wanted to be an oceanographer, that she collected interesting rocks, that she thought penguins were underrated as predators. Evan learned that Victoria had a younger brother who died in a car accident, that she played violin badly but enthusiastically, that she was terrified of bees. They did not talk about the fire. They did not talk about Al-Rahman. They talked about life, messy and imperfect, and worth saving. When they parted ways that evening, Victoria touched Evan's arm, the one with the tattoo. The world needs more people like you, she said. The world needs more people who remember we're all just trying to get home safe. Evan replied, You're not my enemy, Victoria. You never were. She smiled, a real smile this time. Maybe we can be friends. Maybe we can. And as Victoria walked back to her car, she felt lighter than she had in 7 years. She had not fixed Evan Miller. But perhaps, in learning to leave him be, she had started to fix herself. The phoenix on his arm would always remind her. Some people rise from the ashes on their own. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply bear witness to their flight.